Hello, welcome back to another exciting edition of Green TV. I know I say that every time, but I truly am thrilled to be introducing you to one of my friends from the Climate Reality group, Al Gore's training, Lew Blaustein. He's a really funny guy. He's very passionate, and he is in the world of sports and sports media and marketing. And we met at a Climate Reality chapter meeting in New York about 5 years ago. And I was very intrigued to hear about your turn from, being immersed in the sports media world to becoming an advocate for climate awareness and action in your area of expertise. It's kind of like what I did with news. It's also great because I am not a sports person and you live there. And so even though there's a lot of parallels between, how we're approaching our activism and passion and our background in the industry, broadcast news, in my case, sports, yours. So I really am looking forward to this.
It's great to be here, Betsy, and thanks so much for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this chat.
And you are a solutionary of, pretty small number of you that I'm aware of that are inside the sports world in some way and are really doing a lot to green, whether it's stadiums or what is sold or not thrown away at stadiums, to the athletes themselves and their consciousness and what they can do as public figures on their very large platforms to raise awareness. But of course, first you have to get them to be as excited about it as you are, or some small fraction of that. And that maybe has been a little bit like I've been trying to convince people in my industry, broadcast news, and especially the executives, they don't quite get it. They don't quite see why this is news or urgent or as big of a deal as it is, or it's certainly been that way. So it's getting better. So let's go back. You had a very, and probably do still have a very successful career in sports marketing, but that wasn't enough. What was it that kind of woke you up and, as I say, got you to smell the carbon? And what'd you do about it?
I love that. Well, my whole life I was sports nut, fan of every major sport, knew all the statistics, and then worked in sports marketing and advertising and communications, and loved it. I would say at the same time, I was a lowercase e environmentalist. It was something I cared about. It animated voting decisions. I was a member of the Appalachian Mountain Club and all of that. But the passion for the environment did not match my passion for sports, which is up here.
You're not alone in that.
For me, though,
yeah.
The defining moment, it's going to sound really hokey, but it was 9/11. I was working at Sports Illustrated for Kids, actually, at that time, in advertising sales in Manhattan, lived there. And fortunately for me, I didn't know anybody in the buildings, but this was my city, my place. And it felt like I had to do something, but I didn't know what to do. A couple of years later, Tom Friedman, writing in the New York Times, has a column that says green is the new red, white, and blue. That was the headline. And in it, he posited that we were already in Afghanistan, the drumbeat for Iraq was growing ever louder, and we were fueling the wars on terrorism, whatever you thought of those wars, mind you, red, blue, left, right, by our insanely profligate energy use. And it was like the compact fluorescent light bulb, because LEDs were not invented then, went off above my head. And I came to this from a very patriotic point of view, and so I changed out all my light bulbs. I bought a very early edition hybrid car. Went now about 97% vegetarian. All of those things, but personal virtue, so-called, really doesn't cut it. It doesn't really change anything.
It's a start.
Your own personal.
But you got to keep going after that start.
Right. So then I thought, okay, this doesn't cut it. I gotta maybe do something about this with my work. And I started looking into green jobs. And green jobs at that time, and maybe even now, were mainly like installing solar panels on roofs. And I am a klutz. You do not want me on a roof. You want me under a roof.
We got that in common too.
Right. So I knew that wasn't it. And so as I'm doing this research, trying to figure out how I can work in the green space, I start researching the green space and start learning about climate change. And that's when I see these massive global trends of, energy security, geopolitics, and climate change kind of colliding. And I feel like, okay, this is what I have to do with my work. And so what I thought was, I'm good at creating stories, telling stories, and selling stories, i.e. communications, marketing, and business development. On the sports side, can I do that on this green side? There were no jobs in it. So in 2005, I went out as a consultant and did that. And that's what I've been doing for the last, I guess it's 17 years almost. And so all of that's happening. And then about 2009, 2010, I start saying to myself, is there an intersection of green and sports? And if so, what does that look like? And I started poking around, and there was something called the Green Sports Alliance that was forming a kind of a group of stadiums in the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, that were sharing best practices on energy efficient lighting and things.
I covered that. I remember. Yes,
I thought
Alan.
this is Alan Hershkowitz.
Yes, thank you.
And so I thought, this is interesting. So I started poking around more. And then in 2013, I decided I'm going to write a blog about this because no one's doing that. And that will get me to meet everybody who's anybody in this growing but small niche green sports. And so I wrote Green Sports Blog, and that's now going on almost 9 years. And I initially did that to help my consulting business and hopefully add some value to the people and the organizations in the green sports world. But the blog kind of found an audience, and we get between 3,000 and 15,000 unique visitors per month, which compared to ESPN is a rounding error of a rounding error. But in the green sports world, people read it, and it got a following, and we've gotten some advertisers. And it's kind of a known thing within this small but growing niche. It's bigger than you think. And so all of that's happening. And then I start thinking, okay, we're not moving fast enough on climate, and sports is not helping fast enough. They're greening stadiums and stuff, but back in 2015, 2016, 2017, they weren't even saying the words climate and change together. And that was unacceptable to me. And
they talked about the weather of the game that day.
Right. But the climate, but they would talk about things like green and sustainability. I hate the word sustainability.
We need to come up with a better one. No one has yet.
Well, no, it's climate change. People say sustainability when they don't want to say climate change.
Exactly.
They use it as a catch-all phrase so as to not offend.
Well, and also just this quick aside, Trump and the Republicans for a while, like they all got the same memo. They would say, we're for clean air, clean water, but they would never say a stable climate. Never. It was like, that's all they could say. And that was supposed to be like just enough to deflect anyone thinking, well, what about the climate? And they would utter those words. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then what about clean air and clean water, which they were not also for?
That's the other irony.
Right.
Hypocrisy. So, yeah, don't get me started. I know I brought it up, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like almost a intentional thing.
Yeah. And I felt like sports were the sports world and I'll use the technical term, were being weak. they weren't fighting just to say climate change, and they were bowing to the political pressure they felt was real, but wasn't. They could have said climate change, and the sports world would have gone on just fine. And there were people who were doing it. I'm making a gross generalization, but anyway.
The same thing happened in news, by the way, parallel track. They were, tiptoeing around it, had both sides, and just compared to the importance of the stories, our planetary pickle, still a small fraction. They've gotten better. So what you experienced in sports is very similar to what, I was living with news, and you certainly probably observed that too. It's the corporate broadcast business as well as the sports business. Go ahead.
But so I got annoyed, but I could have, there were two paths to go, right? I could have become bitter and frustrated, which happens, but that isn't a good place to be. So I said, okay, what can I do to change that? And I quickly realized that while the New York Yankees or Manchester United or the International Olympic Committee or what have you, they may do a really great sustainability or even climate program, that's going to kind of wash over people. What the people with the power to change culture are athletes. Athletes make a difference. And athletes, and I had interviewed a lot of them through my blog, who were doing really great environmental things, like working on plastic ocean waste, working on e-waste recycling, wildfire relief, etc. And I would ask them, do you make the connection to climate change when you're advocating for this? And there were some who did, but most didn't. And so then I tried to dig into that.
Mhm.
Why are you not?
Mhm.
And three answers kept coming up, the same three. And they are there with some variations in language, but it's too sciencey, and I don't know the science. I don't feel comfortable talking about a scientific topic. Two, it's too political. And three, I'm going to get clobbered on social media for being a hypocrite, because I fly all over the place for my sport.
Right.
And how dare I talk about climate? And so as I was hearing these objections, in my mind, I would think, I have an answer for that. I have an answer for that. I have an answer for that. So all of this to say, that led to me launching a nonprofit in April of 2020 during the first wave of COVID, fun times.
Good time to start something, kind of, if it's virtual.
Called EcoAthletes, ecoathletes.org. And what EcoAthletes' mission is to inspire and coach athletes to lead climate action. That's the mission statement. But like you and I are just talking here, what I say is what we are trying to do is to find and deploy the Muhammad Ali's, the Billie Jean Kings, or to use a current references, the Megan Rapinos, the Colin Kaepernicks, the Marcus Rashfords of the climate fight, because we don't have time for them to stand on the sidelines.
What about Tom Brady? Wasn't he kind of green because of his wife, who's very,
she is, but he hasn't.
Okay. Hello Talk has not gone that far yet. Okay, maybe now that he's retired,
no
hard time. Okay.
If he stays retired.
Yeah.
But in any case, that's so the way I look at it, I envision these fears as a big boulder, right? And athletes are on one side, athletes who are environmentally and climate minded.
Mm-hmm.
And so what EcoAthletes does is we try and chip away at that boulder so it becomes little pebbles, and then they can just walk over, and then we provide them with the forums. Once they feel confident to talk about it, we get them on podcasts, perhaps like this, and panels and traditional media, and we help them with op-eds, and we do campaigns, and that's what EcoAthletes is about.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I love that. Love that.
Yay. I love it too.
Go
ahead.
I bet it's getting a little more fun and easier as people are more receptive. You don't have to explain what climate change is or why they should be concerned now that it's impossible to ignore.
Yes, and it is changing. It is definitely, I've been writing Green Sports Blog for almost 9 years, as I said before, and it is definitely changing, but we need it to change faster, as you well know, because carbon emissions are rising, and we're still heading towards the carbon cliff. And but the good thing is, and it's we have now 65 what we call EcoAthletes champions, it's a global roster, women and men, active and retired. Some have, we have one ex-NFL player, a current Major League Baseball player. We have 4 gold medalists from Tokyo 2020. And we have others who are not well known at all, but who are coming up the ranks. We have 33 sports, and we are helping them. We are providing them with the tools to be able to be that climate leader, that we are trying to transition what we'll call climate curious to climate leader. So we give them community, we give them content, we give them coaching, we provide them with thought leadership opportunities, as I mentioned before, and then we provide them with sponsorship connections to like-minded brands so they can even potentially make some money with brands that are doing the right thing. We vet the brands for them. Mm-hmm. We do not want them to have credible greenwashing charges lobbed against them.
And what do you advise them on the flying issue? Because that is real.
So that is a huge issue in that it's become a thing in their collective minds. I also see it as a big red herring.
Mhm.
Because so, and we go into this in a webinar in great detail, but I'll kind of do the shorthand version of it for this conversation. So I say, well, first of all, here's what you don't say, but you think. There's what you don't say and think, and then there's what you say. And so what you don't say, but you think, is that the people who are criticizing you for this are the ones who are demanding you to do it, because the reason you do it is because you are in essence an entertainer, and these people want you to entertain them. They want you to fly from Miami to Winnipeg to play that hockey game so they can watch and go yay or boo. But then they're going to criticize you for doing that if you talk about climate. So you don't, so they are feeding the problem that they are saying they are so concerned about. So that should give you confidence to know that this isn't really a thing. Okay, but how do you answer it? And the answer is, we are born into a world. We don't choose when we're born. We're born into the world as it is, right? The world as it is we travel to do sports. This is our job. Travel right now on air is carbon intense. Okay, you want me to play the sport, you complainer. I want to play the sport so I can entertain you. We agree on that. Now, let's agree we have a problem. Now, how can we solve it? And so I want what I'm going to commit to, athlete. Let's say I'm an NHL hockey player. I'm going to commit to leading a movement to push the NHL to expend real money in partnership with a university and, let's say, Delta Airlines, I'm making it up, to accelerate research into low carbon or zero carbon aviation fuel. We are trying to solve, we want to be the solution to the problem, because we still want to be able to entertain you. Long after my career is over, if you're still around, you're going to want to watch pro players play hockey at a high level. We want to continue to do that. We just want to do it in a safe way, carbon wise. What do you think about that, complainer? And if complainer still complains, then that's on them.
You have a great website, Lou. I had fun digging into it a little bit last night, and I love wordplay, and I loved when I saw climate comeback, and I wondered how you came up with that term. I think it applies, and is that resonating?
Yes. First of all, I'm glad that you picked up on that, Betsy. It's so that's our hashtag at EcoAthletes, climate comeback. And really where it came from was, the way I look at it is we're in the fourth quarter of the climate game and we're behind. But there is time on the clock to make a comeback. Not a lot. And I'm not going to kumbaya it. It's not going to be easy. The odds are long. But when you think about sports, like think of any sports movie that you've ever seen. Rocky.
In my case.
Right?
Okay, I've seen
or
Rocky.
Miracle, any sports movie
Dreams.
that you,
yeah,
Field of Dreams, it's a little different, but it's always about a team or an athlete who's behind and overcomes tremendous obstacles to overcome the obstacles to win. Athletes do comebacks for lunch. This is what they do. They do impossible stuff. You mentioned Tom Brady before. I don't even like Tom Brady because I'm a Jets fan, but I will give the guy his due. Super Bowl 4 or 5 years ago against Atlanta, Patriots are down 28-3. They are done and dusted. No, they're not. They came back, they won. The 1980 USA Olympic hockey team against the Soviet Union, miracle on ice. I mean, I'm picking out iconic comebacks, but there are comebacks all the time. This is what athletes do.
And I'm
so now we need a climate comeback.
So I was a Joe Montana fan of the 49ers back then.
Against the Bengals in the 89.
And like I said, not a sports fan, but I would watch, the Super Bowl or when the 49ers were in the playoffs because, Joe Montana, who couldn't watch that. So
famous 80-yard drive to win the Super Bowl against the Bengals in the last 2 minutes when they were behind, and he's all Joe Cool and he points out to his teammates who are all nervous in the huddle. He goes, "Look, John Candy's in the crowd." And that relaxed them all, and then boom, they go down the field.
Brilliant.
So that's climate comeback.
I like that. And is it resonating with?
Yes, yes. And we use it on all of our social media, and our champions use it. And it's starting to, it hasn't trended yet. And PS, I'm not sure exactly how you
Maybe we
get
can
that to
help
happen.
you get everybody to
But,
watch this
but
interview on Green TV. Spread
that's
the
right.
word.
So use hashtag climate comeback.
I like that. And I also like that you were some years ago trying to get LeBron to take baby steps, start riding his bike to work. Did you make any headway there?
So two things with LeBron. One, and he and I are close, so I use the first name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first was, I highlighted in Green Sports Blog. This is back in 2014, I think, when he was still with the Miami Heat, and he did a commercial with Nike where, to show what a kind of beast that he was, that he rode his bike to work rather than drive. And so, and in the commercial, kids start following him, and he has this whole Pied Piper effect, and then hundreds and thousands of cyclists follow him to the Heat training center. And what happened was that in Miami, they noticed after the ad, and he didn't say anything about climate, mind you, or anything. He just rode his bike to work and back. And bike commuting went up 8% in the wake of that ad in Miami. So that is just showing the power of sport. So that's the thing I believe to which you were referring. And then, so I tried to reach out to LeBron and his people, but I never heard back. And so, Green Sports Blog, I look at it as the little engine that could. And, I've gotten some great interviews with great athletes, but not like LeBron James yet. But that doesn't stop me. Like when I think LeBron has something to say, or I have something for LeBron to say, I do a mock interview with him. So I write the questions, and then I write the answers as if what I think as what LeBron would say. I've done it with LeBron James, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Tiger Woods.
I love what you do with the Olympics. Katie Couric and Mike Tirici, is that his last name?
Mike Tirico.
Tirico.
And then, do you ever have you seen the show Ted Lasso?
I'm the only one in America who hasn't, but my husband watches it, loves it. I'm just too busy saving the planet to watch, that kind of TV. I'm watching all these climate podcasts, listening.
I think so. So the reason I mention it is the last mock interview I did was with a character on Ted Lasso, Sam Obisanya, who's not a real human being. He's played by an actor. It's a fictional character. His character is a soccer player from Nigeria who the team is sponsored by an airline. He does a promotion for the airline. His fictional father, the character, is in Nigeria and says, "How can you do this, son? This airline is owned by this fossil fuel company that is denuding our environment and our climate." And so then he, on the show, revokes his sponsorship of the airline. The whole team does, in support of the character Sam Obisanya. So I wrote a whole interview with me interviewing Sam Obisanya about that whole thing.
I love your creativity. And there's a lot of
talk. And it's a great show.
So I hear someday after we save the planet, I'll watch all those series that I've been recording.
But there is a climate aspect to it, so you can justify it even now.
Is it? Well, if there is, then I'll watch it. That's all someone needs to say, and I'll watch it. So, and I hear it's not really about only sports. It's about.
No, it's just good. It's just really, but.
A feel-good thing. Who doesn't need a feel-good show right now?
Go for it.
Okay, well, here's something that made me feel very good, and I can't wait to ask you about it. Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle. Jeff Bezos, Amazon. That to me is such brilliant marketing, and I'd love to know if you know the story behind it. Was it Jeff's idea? Did they have to badger him and beg him to do that? Because what it does, of course, is require that every sportscaster, athlete, playing that day, not to mention all the fans, has to say it, Climate Pledge Arena. So for those who had never uttered the word climate in the context of climate change are suddenly, and then as you know, sports fans are not necessarily the most active eco advocates, but you're trying to change that. But it kind of requires then that they, climate pledge, what's that? So I'd love to hear the story behind it and how it has played out, and if there's more of that kind of thing planned at other stadiums being built or renovated, that kind of thing.
Great question. So, and there were several questions in there. So,
Good
um,
at that.
so just a little history. I mean, sports venues have been greening. That has been the kind of the first. That was the first part of the sports greening movement,
Phase
like
one,
sports
yeah, last 10
green
years
sports
ago.
1.0,
Yeah,
and it's been moving, especially in North America and in Europe. And so that's been going apace.
mhm,
And there were LEED Platinum, LEED Gold arenas and stadiums before Climate Pledge Arena. However, you correctly noted that the name Climate Pledge Arena is a a bold step beyond where anything else has gone. Obviously, and you cited it right there. Every broadcast of every Seattle Kraken hockey game or Seattle Storm WNBA game or NCAA tournament game is going to be live from Climate Pledge Arena. You're going to hear that, and if you just roll up, the a number of impressions, a number of viewers that are and listeners that are going to hear that, it's going to be in the hundreds of millions after a time. So as to the
Dennis,
birth of it,
yeah,
the background of it, it was a confluence of events. um, the, Bezos and Amazon had started something called the Climate Pledge, which is a pledge to dramatically reduce carbon emissions from their company, and they've gotten other Fortune 500 companies to join them. And Amazon also has a lot of things that they can be taken to task on climate wise. So I'm not here to
they are,
like
yeah,
sing hosannas on Amazon, but I give them credit for the attempt, and I will let the people who are the watchdogs on this and the nonprofits to say, is Amazon really doing what they say, and is what they say enough? All of that. Putting that on the side, so they started the Climate Pledge. Uh, next domino to fall around the same time was the NHL decides to expand into Seattle with a new team called the Kraken, and the arena was being renovated. It was the old Key Center Arena, Key Arena, where the Seattle Supersonics of the NBA played until they moved to Oklahoma City. And this renovation went to the, every green T dotted, every green T crossed, every green I dotted. And Amazon, was involved, and they bought the naming rights of the arena, and
of
they
course.
decided to name it Climate Pledge Arena. And they told Oakview Group, who was developing the arena, that you need to go, even, to use a Spinal Tap reference, you need to go to 11 on a 1 to 10 scale. And Tim Lewicki, who is one of the partners of Oakview Group, and I've met him, and on Zoom, I should say. I haven't met him in person, but he is someone that has the Pied Piper ability. Like, I'm like a journalist and I'm writing the story, and I'm like, he's just another guy I'm interviewing. About 3 minutes in, I'm like, okay, what do you need me to do? And
That's what we
I mean,
need, people like that in
he's
other industries.
incredible. So
It's his
now
vision. I mean, is he?
it's basically him,
Mhm.
the Kraken, which is the team. They're all aligned, and Bezos, and they're all pushing each other, is what I understand.
Cracking
Uh,
the code of climate silence.
Kraken is and they're very, they're in their first season right now. The arena opened this past October, and and there's a lot of buzz about it. And the Kraken are cool, even though, as an expansion team, they're not doing great
I'm going to
on
start
the
rooting for
ice.
them, the Krakens. Who knew? So we can get more
Yes,
exposure. The better they do, the more
that's
people will hear about.
and everybody is so. And then they have so Oakview Group also developed the New York Islanders, also NHL, their new arena, UBS Arena, which is out on at Belmont Park on the Queens-Nassau border, and that is going to be they're saying carbon neutral on Climate Pledge Arena from day one, which I think there's a little semantic stuff going there, because I don't think you can be carbon neutral before you open. Like, you have to have a year of data, but whatever, they're doing
That's
it
good.
right.
Yep, they're making it a priority.
That's
But
right.
it's more aspirational.
And then UBS is going to be the same. It might take a little longer. They are opening an arena, a minor league hockey arena, in Palm Springs area of California. That's also going to be this way. So they are really driving a lot of movement in this area, Oakview Group. And then the Kraken themselves, aside from the arena, they've made a big commitment in Seattle area to climate justice. And and I wrote a story about what they're doing in one neighborhood where it's, it's near the airport, it's near highways, it's near a power plant. There's a lot of pollution related health problems, and then there are climate issues, and it's it's marginalized people who live there, and they're trying to make inroads both in terms of getting access to sport and to cleaning up the area. So that's what the Kraken are doing that on a community relations area. So I wanted to mention that.
And let's talk a little bit about what goes on inside the stadium, the kind of food that is sold, the containers that the drinks are put in, waste, recycling bins, maybe even compost bins some places.
Mm-hmm.
I know in San Francisco, where I'm from, and I think I told you I went to college with Larry Baer, the Giants, were pretty forward thinking, maybe because it's the Bay Area, in the food that they chose was sushi. And of course, a lot of mocking of, the all the yuppies, whatever. But is that isolated, that kind of thing, like looking at the whole gestalt of the experience at any given arena or stadium?
I think what you're seeing is a trend, certainly towards greener operations. Recycling is expected now, and composting, either on-site composting of back of house, combined with hauling to compost facilities, if there are compost facilities that can handle the food waste nearby. That's becoming much more common. In terms of plant-based options, you're seeing more of that. You're also seeing, and it was high profile at the recent Super Bowl, no single-use cups, aluminum cups, no plastic straws. Seattle had strawless in Seattle. was a promotion they did a couple of years back. So there is a lot of that, but my concern is, that so much of the action around this has been about greening the games, right? Which makes sense. The stadiums were the first thing, then what you just asked about, the operations, all of that makes sense. But the thing is, most humans who are sports fans don't go to sports events. Most people don't go to games. How do they consume games? I mean, look at the Super Bowl. There were 80,000 people at SoFi Stadium. There were 120 million people watching in the United States, and millions watching around the world. How it's the part of the kind of climate action sports stool. I think there are three legs to it. There are the teams and the organizations and the leagues and the stadiums. There are the athletes, and then there's the media. And the media, which you know well about, needs to pressure. They need to be at the table. And in the United States, it's lagging. It is starting to really happen in the UK. For example, in the fall of 21, there was Game Zero, which was a net zero carbon game in the English Premier League, the top soccer league in the world, between Chelsea and Tottenham in London. And they talked about it on the air. Not only on the air in the UK on Sky Sports News, but it did make it onto the NBC Sports broadcast, which partners with Sky Sports on Premier League games being broadcast here. And this is the Game Zero at Tottenham Stadium. And when I heard that, I was like, whoa, that is a big deal.
Sky News has a 15-minute newscast on climate change. They were the first network to
Yes,
announce
they
an
do.
ongoing program, which is what I've been fighting for years, and we still don't have that in this country. So good on them.
Yes, and and at COP26, now I'm switching back to EcoAthletes, there was a big sports presence in Glasgow, including two of our champions went there and presented what we called the COP26 Sports Community Manifesto, which we had signed by 307 athletes and sports executives and climate scientists and et cetera. And
I didn't hear about that. That's great to know.
BBC Sports was on it. Sky Sports was on it. We got a lot of I mean, in the sports world in general, beyond what EcoAthletes was doing, the British media really covered it very well, and it got some coverage here, but the Brits are ahead of us. But that's also that shows that it's doable.
Mhm.
And so I think now the big thing is to get the NBC Sports of the world, the ESPNs, the Fox Sportses of the world, the CBS Sportses of the world to be on this. And there was, I felt a slight glimmer of hope during the recent Olympics in Beijing. Let's not discuss whether it should have been in Beijing, but the idea that 100% of the snow in Beijing was man-made. And that got a lot of coverage, including on NBC Sports, which was broadcasting the Olympics. So I give them credit.
I agree. I agree. And they even, in one of the, I don't remember what I was watching, I'm sure it was NBC, one of the commentators might have been a news person, but they were talking about how not only is that, just like why are we having winter sports Olympics in places where they don't have real snow, at least recently and probably for the foreseeable future, but the environmental impacts of fake snow, just like how, the chemicals that leach into the groundwater system and how the pesticides, the chemicals really can get into the whole, food landscape there. And that was something I didn't even think about. So I was really giving them a lot of credit, good score on that one.
Yep. And I really do think we're coming, the sports world is stepping up. And so there is a lot more going on. I mean, there are other athletes groups. There is now the Green Sports Alliance, yes, but there's Sport Positive Summit, which is another sustainable sports event that I think is must attend out of London, led by the great Claire Poole. There's Acting Green Forum, which is something that I've been involved with, that's trying to bring South and Central and America and the Caribbean into the green sports movement, given the crucial role that those places play in the environment, Amazon rainforest and the like, and also the sports madness that is South and Central and Caribbean. So there is a lot going on. There's also a lot going on in academia. There is a lot of sports sustainability, academic research, peer-reviewed, that's happening all over the world. And there are some really sharp academics, group called Sport Ecology Group that is leading in this way as well.
I just remember while you were talking, it wasn't NBC. I want to give credit where credit is due. It was on The View. The ladies, discussed all the issues, and Sarah Haynes actually brought up that issue of the environmental impacts, negative impacts of having, how many tons of fake snow sprayed before they get there. And then every night they were spraying more, and that's filled with chemicals. So just want to give her kudos for that. I like to give credit. And you said madness. I have often said, if we could just get a fraction of the passion and the energy and the attention and the money that goes into sports, focusing on sports in this country, and I suppose around the world, to focus on, our planetary pickle and what we can do, like that would move the needle, wouldn't it? And what you're doing is trying to actually do that, because the juxtaposition, the difference, the people who know all this, people like you, all the statistics and the batting average and this and that, the details, great details about all the players and the sport, their teams and where they are, all that jargon that I don't know. If we could just get people to know about 419 parts per million, which is what we just hit, which is way past the safe level, which is 350 parts per million of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, then we would know that we have reached critical mass and can start to get out of this critical mess.
You know what? I couldn't say it better myself.
Okay, so
You
go.
just said it.
Okay,
So go team, go,
Yeah.
hashtag climate comeback.
Yeah, I mean, really, you should recruit some of those people that, maybe are no longer playing professional sports and they're
We're doing it.
fathers or uncles and they want to really help do something for their kids' future. Really, I think you're onto something.
There's also one other thing that I want to mention,
Mhm.
that in the green sports world, and I've noticed this from the beginning and now in the athletes as well, women are playing leading roles across the board, from the academics, from the business side, from the decision making side, and then among the athletes. You know, Hannah Mills, who is an Olympic gold medal winning sailor from the UK, started a nonprofit called Big Plastic Pledge about plastic ocean waste. I would say about 2/3 of our EcoAthletes champions are women. And you see in the social justice movement, the WNBA taking a huge leadership role. And now with the equal pay work
Mhm.
done by the women's soccer players in the United States. And so their activism and making a difference in a positive way has been natural, seemingly drawing women in, and we're certainly getting our share of men as well. But I just wanted to make that comment.
And I call that womanifesting change, not manifesting, but womanifesting.
So there you have it.
Okay, so you're my sports hero. You're my champion, Lew. I love what you're doing. And
Thank you so much. I thank you for doing this.
well, we want to get word out about what you're doing and also about Green TV. So we hope that you'll tell your fans of your blog all about Green TV. And we hope that you and all your fans who go check out this interview, they like it. How could they not like you? We'll subscribe. We're looking to get 1,000 subscribers. We're about halfway there. Once we do, we can start live streaming. Well, yay, on YouTube and Green TV. And that way we can do many more interviews and have a lot more content because there's so much to talk about and so little time, as you know.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if you're interested, check out greensportsblog.com and ecoathletes.org. But Betsy, thank you so much for what you're doing. And I'm glad to be a part of it.
This was a lot of fun. I knew it would be. Take care.